Welcome. We're glad you could join us today on Speaking of Spirits. Today we're going to be talking about the solstice, summer and winter solstice. Depending on where you live, they are opposite of each other if you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. We're in the northern hemisphere, so we're going to be talking about it from our point of view today. The solstice, though, is an interesting thing. They are the shortest day. The winter solstice is the shortest day of sunlight. Summer solstice is the opposite, the longest day of sunlight. And the energy around both of them are what we're going to be discussing today. One of the things to remember about the solstice and the festivities that used to happen, we used to be a party people.
Yes, we were.
And this goes way, way, way back before we worked 8-hour days, before industry, when just about everybody was related to the land. You spent the entire summer cutting wood to survive the winter. You raised your food, you raised your crops. The harvest in the fall was what you depended on to get you through the winter. This goes back to when we were all very attached to the land. And so these 2 days, the shortest Sunday and the longest Sunday, were very, very important to the cultures. And there were actually developed celebrations and festivities around. And again, this was back when people would gather together as a community. You know, people would come up from the valleys and down from the mountains, and we would all gather, in the meadow for 3 days of joyous festivating to celebrate these.
And lots of babies were produced 9 months later.
Yes.
Just saying.
And from what I've studied and interesting, the winter solstice, which in the northern hemisphere happens in late December, and that used to be the celebration for the sun god, because that's when the sun started to come back out. And we would get roughly about 1 minute in the morning, 1 minute at night, longer sun until the summer solstice in July. And that celebration carried over for many, many generations. And as we've mentioned many times on the podcast, as Christianity took over, a lot of times what they would do is they would take these ancient festivities and they would attach their religious meaning to it. And a lot of Bible scholars and everything admit then that Jesus was not born in the middle of winter. Yeah, he would have been born in the spring.
Had a lot to do with this whole shepherd thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Connected to the shepherds. Yes. And so as Christianity took over, it took the celebration for the sun god and turned it into the celebration for the Son of God, celebrating the birth of Jesus. But the celebration actually goes back to when we started celebrating the sun coming up longer, staying out longer. And this was also nature's life-giving time. This is when birth, this is what we relate spring to. Mm-hmm. Because as fall is nature's death time, as, the leaves change and fall off the trees, grasses, having a speaking problem, grasses stop growing in the fall. So that's nature's and death time, and then winter is kind of a time of reflection and then spring comes. And as the sun stays out longer every day, then the snow melts. Those of us in the northern hemisphere,
we look forward to it.
Yes,
I'd like to interject. I hate snow.
Tim has snow issues. We know.
Yeah.
And as the sun comes out, it warms up. The snow and ice melt. Spring comes. The grasses come back. The flowers come back. The leaves come back. This is nature's birth. This is nature celebrating life, coming back to life again. And so a lot of the festivities that happened around the solstice were connected to this birth and death and life cycle that nature was happening.
Yeah.
As doing.
So, the planetary year is quartered into 4 quarters, right? So you have the solstices and the equinoxes, right? And these are the time of year when they say the magnetic power of the moon is at its strongest. And it's evidenced by the high tides that happen during these quarterly, right? Not just daily tides, but on the quarters, the tides are even bigger. And you're in the Coast Guard, so did that line out?
Yes, it did.
Okay, yeah. Did you have to roll the ship? Was that part of your...
No, I was not on that particular ship.
Oh, man, that looks so cool on YouTube. You got to
yes.
watch that, man. So, the pull of the moon is so powerful that it draws all the liquids on Earth towards itself. And when this pull is at its strongest, the evidence of this attraction can be easily registered and even plotted in advance. So everything, we know on tides now, tide charts. It'll tell you exactly, like to the minute, when high tide's going to be and all this. So I lived on the beach for a few years, and I'm not a beachy person, but I looked for the low tides because I was galloping horses for their exercise every day. So I had to, correspond all the workouts to low tides. So.
There's a difference in high tides and low tides too.
Yes.
Low tide is just your thing, but you can vary in a low tide.
Yes, you can.
In a high tide.
Yes, you can.
So the high tide is just like the highest point for that day.
Right. Yes.
But over a month or something, that high point will change.
Yes.
To the day. So.
2 other major points of the year. We talked about the solstices. The increased effects of the pull of the magnetic power of the moon at the time of the vernal and autumnal equinoxes are easy to be seen because of the tides, and the effects caused by the increase of these powers leads to. I think the equinoxes might be. There's some studies that I looked at that said the equinoxes actually have more of a magnetic pull than the solstices do, which I thought were kind of interesting because I always thought the solstices to be more powerful. But I think they're more powerful spiritually. Yeah. And the vernal equinoxes are more powerful magnetically. So, so our celebrations were pre-Christianity on these things, right? So, like you said, mass gatherings to celebrate and share the crops, because you have one farmer that was doing all the wheat, and one guy's doing all the potatoes, one guy's doing the pigs, and everybody's splitting crops in their communities. So it's a big deal, especially the fall harvest, and
yeah, especially in the fall for the fall harvest.
That's a big one. Let's see here. I know you guys touched on a lot. One of the other things too, talking about kind of like the cycles and like the moon and things like that, we have to remember that, I don't know, at least for me, with the moon, because the moon really affects like the water, like the waves and the tides, ourselves were made of water. We, no matter how much we deny it, all the way from the end, like from the beginning of civilization, there's a reason that people have been drawn to the sun and the moon. And for example, if you have kids or you work with kids, if it is a full moon out there, like it affects the tides, it affects the ocean, but children are wild at the full moon. I mean, that's not just a myth. Like, you have a day, I used to work preschool, and there would be a day where these kids were super emotional and just weird. Go figure, it's a full moon. And I really think it is because we are still connected, no matter, kids are very connected because they're not distracted by like technology and like real life and things like that. And for like the summer solstice and things like that, the summer and the winter solstice, we have the masculine energy and we have the feminine energy. So we have the yin and the yang. And the summer is the masculine energy, right? It's like the fire, the long days, And we are kind of powered by the sun, like not just our crops and things like that, but spiritually we have this extra energy because the days are longer. And for the winter solstice, everyone hates the winter here, but I love the winter. I think the winter is equally powerful. I think we think of the sun and we think of this masculine energy. It's very strong, it's bright, the days are long, we have a lot of energy. That's like the party times for people back in the day. That was a big deal. But the winter is like the dark feminine energy, and it has its own power, right? It's kind of when you're forced to be inside, it's dark. And back in the day, it was kind of a scary time because fire is how people like had light at night, but it was very dangerous for them because your houses could easily catch on fire, your crops could easily catch on fire. And so the winter is kind of when we were forced to kind of be stuck with ourselves. We're stuck inside, we're stuck without light. And it kind of spiritually, it's a time for us to kind of confront the darkness in us, like our fears, our anxieties. You can't go out and escape it and be distracted by the merriment of the sun. And so the winter is that time for the earth to kind of like hunker down and grow and rest. But as a society, I think the dark feminine energy kind of has a negative connotation because it's cold and it's dark. And I think that's kind of partly
I'm
where,
not touching that.
The wind hurts your face.
Okay, fair. You have a point there. But I do think too that through history we can kind of see, like through Christianity and stuff, like Jesus was born in the summer. Like there's still this inclination to be drawn more towards summer than winter. And I think we see that a lot in our societal, the way that our society is built, because we think of like Stonehenge, and even the ancient Egyptians used the sun, right, through their monuments, and we can see that their monuments lined up with the summer solstice. And in most historical societies, it leans towards like masculine energy and well, the patriarchy, you know, it's mostly men governed. And I think a lot of that does come from that spiritual, we're drawn spiritually towards the light because it's easier to deal with. And we draw away from like the dark of winter. And I think that kind of has like, you know, brought us to like how we are societally. We're still like summer's good and winter's bad.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
pretty
saying?
Much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Well,
Can't agree.
After I've fallen so many times on the ice this year, yeah, I've had it. I want it over.
Done with the winter. But I think it's good to still like recognize the energy, maybe not.
No, yeah, I understand.
Yes, the energy is still important because the yin and the yang, you have to have
right.
one, and you can't have the other without it.
Well, to kind of dovetail with that, one of the articles that I ran across with this is that the energy around the winter solstice, the darkness, is also kind of like you said, is that we are somewhat, because it is dark, because, you know, there's not a lot of daylight. So people, especially historically, you know, many generations ago, back when we used to have these parties, they were isolated.
Yeah.
People would be by themselves. And even today, people, when they're by themselves, they have to be by themselves. And one of the things is that they have to work through their emotions. And the more that I learn about humanoids and how we operate and everything, dealing with emotions is very hard for humans. We don't want to do that. It's very uncomfortable. And, you know, life is kind of 50% great and 50% sucks. And the 50%...
That's generous.
What, the good or the bad?
Yes.
Yeah. But the 50% that sucks, you know, brings out a lot of emotions. And people tend to try to hide those emotions, ignore them, don't work, instead of addressing them and saying, yes, I am depressed. Yes, I am upset. Yes, I am mad. Whatever, and working through those.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of dovetails what you were saying, is that the energy with the... I think the energy is still there for the winter solstice, but it's a very uncomfortable energy.
Yeah, but I think
It's something
almost,
a lot of people don't want to do.
And I think it's almost a stronger energy because, one, it feels stronger because you're avoiding it. It's like, if you're going to avoid it, here I come.
That could be, yeah.
But also, it's that energy that, like, you have to have that energy. You have to have that dark winter to produce growth.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, winter is like
I'm
the
gonna
time
write that
where you're
down.
resting spiritually, and if we didn't have winter, there's no time for that growth in this. Like think about planting things, right? It needs time underneath the earth to like grow.
Well, right, and I mean, without all of the hated snow, Tim, we wouldn't have all of the water for our crops later.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is a time, and
Well, we all know we get food from grocery stores now.
yeah, it just magically appears.
It comes from the package.
We don't
So,
need snow anymore.
We don't need no stinking snow. So my neighbor she said to me a couple of years ago, we were driving through Logan Canyon in the fall, and she says, I just love the fall, but I'm always sad because it reminds me that winter's coming. And until I lived in Idaho, I didn't really hate winter so much. God dang it, it's cold here in the winter and the snow and the ice. But anyway, digress. I said, for me, I kind of like the downtime. Mm-hmm. It's the time of year where I have a little more time to maybe read some books and a little more time in the evening to study and a little more time. Because in the summer, I usually get up before the sun and I go to bed late. And so I'm just go, because taking care of the animals and taking care of this and doing that and doing this. And it's kind of like I need the break.
It's restful.
Without the falling on the ice. That,
that does not
holy
count.
hell, I'm so tired of that. Anyway, so, what I thought was interesting that I ran across. So we talk about, and I didn't know this where it came from. Remember, so how people will write Xmas instead of Christmas? Well, Xmas was actually, it was referred, in the winter solstice, it's a sense of something extra being around. So it was referred to the Xmas presents, not present, like I'm buying you something.
Yeah.
The Xmas presents. And the spirit of Xmas was the Xmas tide. It's this incoming tide of energies that you get. So I didn't know that's where it came from. Wow. Unless this is all bogus. But if it's on the internet, it's true. But
of course.
Anywho.
Especially if the internet's in a grocery store.
But there's the ancient symbol for the sun is the solar cross, the X. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that people were shortening Christmas, well, they were, because they were using it later for that, but it was Xmas, as in the solar cross.
Yeah.
The sun energy, yeah. So one thing I like about the winter solstice, or Yule, is the fact that ghost stories are a tradition at Yule. I mean, come on, we're a paranormal group, right? It's the best thing ever, is telling of ghost stories. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that aspect of celebrating Yule, is telling those spooky stories so that your kids don't sleep for 3 weeks. That's the best.
We need to bring that back.
I know. We need to bring it back.
We need to make that a
Mission
thing.
to bring that back.
I know. And we need to bring Festivus back. I'm just saying.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
So I did not know this. The celebration of Xmas, right? The sun, by decorating a tree was caused by a person witnessing energetic lights in the forest. I don't know what that means.
I've never heard that.
I'm almost thinking it sounds like the fairies of Ireland, the Fae. But
It's either the fairies or another UFO, but we'll come back to
or whatever Tim was smoking in this room before we got here. Just saying, but
Incense.
still smoking here.
Incense.
that. We are having incense
what he
issues in the
says.
studio tonight, yes.
The practice began in Bavaria, the Christmas tree, right? Well, the Xmas tree. And legend has it that it was Martin Luther, the founder of the Protestant Reformation, who first decorated the Xmas tree to celebrate the lights around a tree he witnessed in the Black Forest.
He was good at nailing things on walls.
It's true.
So, Tim. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and that when people put the tinsel represented the lines of silver energy that pass through the energy field of a tree, and the colored balls that can be seen or that shimmering in the energy worlds that if you're fortunate enough to see that light. So
Very cool.
yeah, I didn't know that.
That's really cool.
I still like the ghost stories the best part.
Yes.
but
Still, you need to bring that back. Yes.
But, so world religions have used the power of these 4 quarters, right, of the year to sustain their religious festivals and celebrations from the beginning of time, really. These quarters are the natural times of celebration of universal energies and how they manifest on Earth. I'm reading through some of this stuff because a lot of it's kind of deep. But anyway, the deeper meaning of the celebration of lights, however, is the spiritual power, the light of the sun, which can be celebrated both winter and the summer solstice. So we're celebrating the sun both times. And I think it's, I kind of hate to hear when my neighbor said how much she hated winter because it's just so barren and ugly. And I'm like, the earth needs to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It needs to rest for a few months, just like animals that go into hibernation. Mm-hmm. That restful time is needed. And we're so tuned in 24/7. I sleep with the TV on, or I can't sleep. That's just, I have to drown out all the voices in my head. So I have to have that noise. And when it goes off, I wake up, I turn it on, I go right back to sleep again. Okay. We're so tuned in electronically that I think that we lose touch. You were talking about the little kids and how they go nuts. My parents were both cops. Oh. They hated working full moons.
Full moon?
They hated it. And I had a professor when I was in college who used to argue with me that there's no such thing as the power of the moon on the human psyche. And I said, really? Here's my parents' phone number. Talk to them. Because violent crime goes up exponentially. People who have any psychotic tendencies, it comes out in full force on the full moon.
Or on psychotics.
Yeah.
Really, it's weird.
Yeah. I mean, and you were an EMT, so you saw this kind of behavior too, I'm sure. Yeah.
The meth heads were much crazier.
Yeah.
It's true, though.
Yeah.
It's not a coincidence.
No.
It can't be.
Well,
No.
if the theory is correct and the moon has effect on the water, well, the human body is, 80-90% water?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
or a large percentage.
Yeah.
The exact number escapes me, but it's a
pretty
large
high.
percentage water. So if the pole of the full moon has an effect on the water, then it would stand to reason that it would affect the human body.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know I don't. The nights that I've been an insomniac almost all of my life, but the nights that I have the worst time sleeping, and I have blackout curtains, I'll get up and I'll open the curtain. I'm like, oh crap, that's right, it's full moon.
It's a full moon.
You know, even if I knew it was going to be full moon, if I've forgotten by the time I got to bed, it's like, it's just, I toss and turn all night long. It's just that pole is there. Maybe it's that wolfy thing in me. I don't know. I know you guys talk about wanting to be a werewolf, not a vampire. I just don't want to do that transformation. But I think it's there. I just
don't want the sparkly skin.
So, I don't know. What else did you have? I wanted to say something about the Druids, which I thought was interesting. The Druids were the first to use mistletoe, right? It was during the waxing phase of the moon. So when the building phase of the moon, they would hang mistletoe. They would use it in their practices. And they would also feed it to their livestock to ensure their fertility. So, which was interesting because I always thought mistletoe was toxic.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that
So
works.
don't try this at home, peeps, with
We
your
do not
livestock.
recommend it.
I don't know. I always thought mistletoe was toxic, but I do know that we would take the shotgun out and blow it out of all of our trees at home. I thought, and then we'd sell it at the grocery store tied with little bows.
Two birds, one stone.
Yeah.
A little bit of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot, country kids. So,
So my knowledge of the solstice really goes around the Mayan culture.
okay.
And I remember when I was growing up reading a book.
A book.
A book that the school made me read, I might add.
On barbecue.
On barbecue, yeah. Close. Human sacrifice. These festive parties, as one might say, happened at solstice times. And so most of their buildings and temples
God,
are
sick.
perfectly in line with that.
Oh,
And
yeah,
once that
yeah.
the sun was in the exact position, whatever they thought it was, the deed, as it were, was done.
gosh. Now that's interesting. So there's this little place. So in a much smaller scale than the Mayans, there's a tiny little town in West Texas called Paint Rock, Texas. And literally, I think there's like 4 buildings there. One of them was a gas station that they were. I have to digress just a second because this is so creepy. They were reopening this gas station, and I was the inspector for the tanks, for the underground storage tanks, right?
Oh, okay.
So I go into this gas station, and there's all these rattlesnake skins. It's a big gas station, like the convenience store's huge, right? Like on like our Maverick, but in this tiny town with 3 buildings, right? And there's all these rattlesnake skins, like all over the walls. And they're massive rattlesnakes. In West Texas, rattlesnakes are the biggest snakes I've ever seen in my life.
They got huge snakes. down
Yes.
there.
So they like stretch across a whole highway lane. I mean, they're that big. Ugh. Anyway, and so I asked him, I said, where did all these snakes come from? And he shows me this picture because out behind the building was this shed that had some of the equipment in it for the gas station. Well, it had been closed for so long that a snake den developed in this rattlesnake den. And so they had opened the door. When they bought the facility, they go out there to inspect, they open the door, and there's just an enormous ball of rattlesnakes. And I'm like, and you didn't burn it? Because that's what I would have done.
He's like, yeah, I'm out. See it.
I mean, so this is very close to Sweetwater, Texas, where they do the rattlesnake roundup, right? Been there. I still have nightmares about that shit.
Been there, ate that.
Yeah.
It was
So
weird.
anyway, well, they took like a fire extinguishers, and they
Okay.
started hosing them down because once you freeze those snakes up, they can't move, they can't strike. Anyway, and then they start killing them all, and they put the snake skins all over. I digress. Anyway, it's right next to this really cool place on this private ranch in Paint Rock. This private ranch owns it, but they open it to the public so you can see the Indians down there, and I don't know what tribe, but they had painted, and so they have pictographs and petroglyphs where they etched in on the stones all of these different scenes that you have to look through the rocks during the equinoxes and the solstices for the scenes to light up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only problem with doing that is that you're in the middle of a boulder field where these rattlesnakes are in order to see this shit. So I'm like, I'm not doing it. Sorry. Maybe the winter. I could go in there in the winter when the snakes are all balled up somewhere in somebody's shed. But anyway, I'm sorry. I hate
There's only
snakes.
3 buildings there, so.
Yeah, there's only 3. They found the one. Yeah. Ooh, I'm telling you, that's a scary place, West Texas.
Well, the rattlesnake roundup is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's craziness. It's weird. And that's how they have the guy that walks through the snake pit. I know this isn't solstice related,
oh, no,
but
I'm enjoying.
well, what they
but
do
I'm
is
terrified.
they freeze them. They chill him way, way, way down to like just above freezing overnight, so that in the next day when he's doing this performance, they're too lethargic to do anything. So he just walks through there. They're like, look, they don't bite. Yeah.
That's an
Okay.
old Pentecostal trick.
Yeah. That should be another topic.
We'll get back to that on.
Okay, fine.
It's a good topic.
So we're talking
You're coming
about
up with great ideas today, Tim.
We're true.
yeah.
True.
We're talking about these solstices, and one of the big draws is Stonehenge, right?
Yes. Yes. Most
So-
famous.
I really want to go, but I'm not sure I could deal with the freaks that go. And I'm sorry if you've been to Stonehenge and you think it's really cool during a solstice, but there are a lot of weird things that are going on. It's not just... Sometimes we get a little carried away, like Burning Man, carried away.
Yes.
You know what I'm
Hey,
saying?
I really want to go to Burning Man.
Burning Man is a
the
Nevada
record.
legacy. Okay.
What?
It
Nevada,
is.
You cannot insult the Burning Man. We know we're weird. It's fine.
Well,
like-
it's funny
It
because
was a good idea
why-
that just went crazy.
That's why all the aliens go to Nevada. Okay. It's true.
well, Burning Man is in Nevada, but all the characters at Burning Man came from California.
Yeah.
also true.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It just went a little haywire. So, in 3000 BC, the basis of the monument of Stonehenge was the spiritual burial site for a civilization which lived 2 miles away. So they lived within what they called Durrington walls. It was a settlement. So a lot of these English settlements had walls. They had walls for protection, right? Mm-hmm. So
Vikings, but that's another story.
Yeah. So it wasn't until around 2600 BC that another group actually began the process of building Stonehenge. And then, I don't know, about 50 years ago, a lot of the boulders were uprighted because they had fallen over. So they were put back into place from what they believed they were. So some of them had fallen over, and we surmised how they looked so that we put them up. So it's not completely natural.
I have questions about the word surmised.
Well, but then again, this is a massive rock. It's not going very far.
No. They just fell over. So they thought that maybe this one went on top of that one, and they put it up there with a tractor.
Yeah, okay.
But some of them stayed upright, and they had like the bridge of the boulder on top. Others had fallen over.
I was going to say, these stones are so huge and so massive, even if they fall over, they're not going a long ways. So it's probably not that hard to figure out where they came from.
Yeah, I just don't know if, this boulder is laying down. Maybe it stood upright. I don't know how they...
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm...
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I'd like to go there, but I'm not sure I want to go during one of these festivals because I think they would probably put me in jail because I would not have a good time. But I'm really conservative when it comes to how I party. You know what I'm saying? It's so like the weirdness.
So you're not going to Burning Man?
Yeah, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I could do it. I'd have to be on some kind of edible. So
they have those at Burning Man.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
I hear they have really good incense too.
So yeah, Tim. Jeez. So experts believe Stonehenge was aligned with the solstice. That's how it was aligned. It wasn't necessarily aligned with the quarters, but we see a lot of building temples, like the Mayans, the pyramids. The pyramids are aligned for how the star map is on the quarters.
Yeah.
Now, okay, they didn't have computer and Google back then, so where did that come from? Everything comes back to UFOs, doesn't it?
It really does, though.
Either that or proof that humanoids are de-evolving.
Yeah, we're just
I
getting
actually
stupider.
am in that category.
I did, yeah.
You can only have so
It's
many
TikTok.
numbers in DNA.
It's
It's going
TikTok.
down. That's true.
I'm sorry. You got on the TikTok and all of a sudden the IQ started
That's-
going.
yeah,
Just
it
like,
You know, I bet you if you were to graph that, you are absolutely correct.
so, so I'm going to just touch on one thing. There's this rock called the heel stone. It's a singular block that's at this, it shines onto the center of the circle, and when it's lined up on the solstices, the light comes through it and shines right in the middle of Stonehenge. I think that's pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
That is really
So
cool.
I do want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in a Stonehenge group on Facebook because I think it's so cool because they go out there like almost every morning and they take a picture of how the sun's aligning in there. And it's just
cool.
fascinating. I mean, it's like these people had mad skills who built stuff like this. I mean, we're talking 2600 BC.
Mm-hmm.
And when was the pyramid? When were they built? I mean, I don't know. Did we go
Long
below
time
zero? I mean, that's what I'm saying is they have mad skills to align this stuff without graphs and charts and all of the technology that we have, and we still screw up a tunnel. We can't make it meet.
Seriously.
You know what I'm saying?
I think your theory might be correct with the technology. Like maybe all of these cultures about that time, it's no coincidence that they all of their monuments have something to do with the sun.
Yeah.
All over the world. And we look at it and we're like, that's so incredible that they could do that. But if you think about it, there was no technology, but they were so in tune with the earth and the energies. That's all they had. Like they would have died.
That's kind of the point
otherwise.
is they didn't have technology and they didn't have Google and they didn't have computers, so their brain energy
they actually
was
used
focused
their
around
brain.
the stars
Yeah,
and the sun
exactly.
and
Right.
things like that. To me, I can't figure out how the ancient Polynesian islanders could navigate,
Oh, right.
just by using the stars.
I
Well,
watched a cartoon and it had something to do with it.
the cartoon.
That's
see?
what it is.
Moana.
Yeah, the L formed between the first finger and thumb is the navigational device used. But I mean, back then though, they didn't have technology, so they used their mental energy on what they knew,
Yeah.
which was the sun and the stars and the seasons and things like that. So
And because we have Google now, the reason why I remember that I read that book and learned about Mayans and their sacrificial rituals is now you can have a splendid vacation there.
Right?
The Mayan thing popped up. You can rent a room right there
Where the sacrifices were.
for like
Okay.
$300 a
God's
night.
got to be haunted as hell. We've
You
got to
see
take our
the sun?
equipment. Oh my
road
god.
trip.
Road trip.
In fact, I hear there's even a guy in a grass skirt that kind of does a thingy-majiggy.
Okay, you lost me
I
in the
don't
guy
know
at the
what
grass
that
skirt
means.
thing,
But
Like
They-
a mock sacrifice, like a
Sort of.
no.
Except they don't do the sacrifice.
but did they take
part.
requests?
not
Okay.
that they're letting us know. Maybe
right.
that's how they get us down there, and then we're the sacrifice.
That's
So we're better for the internet.
Yeah. Long story short, Google is great. Okay. Anyway, so the solstices are real. The energy's real. The draw is real. Was there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I don't think so, except maybe the plasma bubble.
Oh, what
very
is that?
interesting. Well, I'm not a very sciencey person, so I'm hoping maybe you guys will hear this and be like, oh, I can process that better. But apparently, during the June solstice, so that's the longest day, that's the most powerful energy solstice, there is a phenomenon called plasma bubbles. Well, okay, let me back up. Plasma bubbles are normal-ish, like they happen. They affect radio waves by causing like delays, and they degrade like the performance of GPS, and they like mess up like latitudinal lines or whatever. It's a thing. But anyway, apparently it's based on ionospheric phenomenon.
Okay.
So it's like
It's like-
geomagnetic.
Okay.
So that's like the Northern Lights.
Northern Lights kind of
like
thing,
that,
yes.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's energy that compiles all together and then eventually kind of like boop, bursts
Like static
out.
electricity,
Yeah,
just
kind of.
let's
and
go.
it causes things like this. But apparently they can kind of track when they're going to happen and where they happen and where it's normal. But apparently during the June solstice, there's irregularities with the plasma bubbles. In certain areas, they're either really unpredictable or they're more powerful, but it only happens around that time. And so there's not a lot of research right now, but I read a couple scientific articles that I understood hardly anything, but there's starting to be a lot more research. Again, there's not a lot now because they're just discovering it, but there's these irregularities in these certain areas, like the Southeast Asian region, I believe Northern Africa maybe, but there's, very,
So this is in the ionosphere?
Mm-hmm.
Things
I
that are
believe
happening up
so.
there?
Now
Okay.
that's interesting because I wonder if that leads into some of the phenomenon that we see in the triangles.
That could be.
right?
Right, so
that's what I was wondering.
The
like,
Alaskan
what's-
Triangle with all the downed aircraft. Well, if these plasma balls are going off, or bubbles, or whatever you call them, it's screwing with altimeters, magnometers, in
Messing
your
up all the-
airplane, all of your instruments. It's gonna, you fly through a bubble like that. Holy hell.
It's going to jack up everything. On
Yeah.
And,
And
you very
if
easily
you're-
could get turned around and going in a different direction.
Even a ship, all of the ships that have gone missing, like in the triangles, where their instruments just or something happened, and they can. So we just did this episode on the triangles, and now it's fascinating. I wonder if some of that leads into it.
It's interesting, huh? And I don't
Very
know.
well could be connected. Now that would also be, where we are now, that would also really affect communications. Like
You
I
bet.
said, GPS systems, satellite communications, radio.
Yeah,
And even just affect people how we feel. Like
Sure.
if you think about like if you walk up or if you're near big generators, you hear
Oh.
people feel kind of icky and feel. So it's kind of interesting. And I don't know what any of these charts mean, but if you look at the charts of the research, you see like huge
Spikes in the waves.
discrepancies. Yeah.
Well, we know from being in that building that we did the investigation on. What was it called? The old gun plant building? They had 2 ginormous rooms of electrical equipment. I mean, the rooms are as big as a house.
Yeah.
To power all of the
Well, they got some massive equipment down there.
yeah. I mean, the building's going to be destroyed now. It's going to be,
A
but
hotel? Is that? Did
yeah,
you hear
it's
it's
a
going to be a
hotel.
hotel?
Yeah. So,
Whatever.
but we felt you could feel it just getting closer to the outside of these buildings.
Like
You
thick
could feel
air.
like just the feeling.
It was weird. It was like an anxiety feeling.
Yes.
It was like your body was saying,
Run
"That's
the
not
other
good.
way.
You should leave."
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine working around that all day long?
No.
As I understand it, a lot of those buildings down there were put up during World War II.
Right.
To do, and this is probably the building you were thinking of.
It's the largest one.
Yeah, because they would actually put, as I understand it, airplanes, and they had this huge like conveyor system
They still
along the
had it.
ceiling that they would bring the airplanes down to construct them to each.
Well, it was bombs they're making in there.
Oh, it was a bomb?
munitions.
Okay.
So they had huge cranes, massive cranes. They could pick up like a locomotive engine. They were
Yeah,
that big.
so these massive
Yeah.
cranes
So-
and this whole conveyor system
Right.
that was designed to move these huge, heavy objects.
Right.
That would take an incredible amount of
Oh.
electricity.
So you feel that, and that's not even anywhere near what the energy from the sun is on the,
Yeah.
and these plasma, what are they called?
Plasma bubbles.
Bubbles. I can't even imagine what that would do to you. Spontaneous human combustion.
I was thinking
Just
about
I
that.
know, right? We
like
just
those
did that
areas
episode.
that you were saying that
Those
they
fire ley
happen.
lines.
Are they tic tac shaped?
So
Seriously.
yeah.
But the plasma bubbles are a normal thing. They
They-
just
Yeah, they happen just in like normally, but the difference is that around the June solstice they go a little cray cray. They get a little out of hand,
okay.
and they're
Is it more of them, or just bigger, or wider ranges?
irregularities. So
So
to
it
me,
sounds like
reading
they're
about it, it's
not
like
tracking the same or something.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
not tracking the same. They're more unpredictable. That could be in magnitude and place and time and how long they last.
So all of this comes cyclic, right? So
Yeah.
you could be UFO connection on some of these structures that were built to align themselves. I don't know, ancient aliens, right? Or you have the fire ley lines that we talked about in the spontaneous human combustion episode, and plasma bubbles like burning people up.
Yeah. Yeah. or
You're in the
causing
wrong place
plane
at the wrong
wrecks
time,
doing
or
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of spooky. I was like, well, the June solstice was cool until then. Lord.
It's still cool.
little-
The wind doesn't hurt your face.
Yes.
Yes.
Unless it's a plasma bubble.
Well, you won't know because apparently
Huh.
you're dead when you burn up. So
Yeah.
Okay. I might have to study these plasma bubbles.
Good luck. It's there's a lot. Well, what's on it is hard to understand, but it's really interesting. So
Cool.
yeah.
One of the, I know there's a lot of, coming back to the energy of, the solstice and what's going on, there's a lot of spiritual paths that are based more around the lunar cycle, but kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
And that is as the moon is growing is the time when you bring things into your life, when you bring new things in. And when the moon is waxing, as it's going to the dark phase, you remove things from your life. And so the solstice would be, even though the lunar cycle is more of a monthly base because it's the lunar cycle, the solstice could be along those lines, but more for a year project.
It's still cyclical.
Still
Well,
a
they
cycle
still-
thing to
people
bring
still
things
say-
in, let things go.
and I'm not sure that our farmers do it here. Idaho's potato state, that you're always supposed to plant your potatoes on a full moon.
Yeah, it's like the farmer's almanac still goes by.
By a
Yeah,
lot
but
of
they're
the moon.
they're only right like 30% of the time. I've done the math,
Oh,
but still, I know.
Lame.
I know.
Just randomly picked on a plasma bubble study,
Oh,
and they're
Lord.
doing it in Utah.
They are
Oh
not.
no!
Yeah.
I wonder where.
I don't know. I try and there's lots of words and a whole lot of,
Right.
of syllables.
Yeah, like
It's not an audio book, huh?
It's a shame.
just some light reading to put you to sleep.
Okay.
Right?
Very interesting.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today on Speaking of Spirits. We were talking about the solstice, summer, winter solstice, and how they affect the human body. We got a little bit in there about rattlesnakes, plasma bubbles, and all kinds of fun things. So we're glad you could join us today, and please join us on the next podcast of Speaking of Spirits. You've been listening to Speaking of Spirits, powered by Pocatello Paranormal Research in Pocatello, Idaho. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you could be here. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do us a favor and go to whatever platform you are listening to the podcast on and give us a review. We prefer the 5-star reviews. This helps us know how we're doing, and it helps others to find the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on our next podcast.